Good day and welcome to Hello Malaysia. I am your host Surati Sanusi, and today we are talking about a topic which is very dear to me because I can relate to the topic today. It's about stroke. And in the studio I have representatives from the National Stroke Association of Malaysia, also known as NASAM. On my left we have Lim Yi Lin. She's a board member. And the other one, that lovely lady, we have Sylvia Chong. She is the General Manager of NASAM. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we talk about stroke, let's get to know both of you. Maybe we'll start with Sylvia. What's your background and how are you related to the NASAM?
Okay, I am the General Manager of NASAM, and actually I'm a chartered accountant by profession.
I see.
Yeah, and in all my career I was involved in the corporate world.
I see.
Yeah, so when I was taking a short break from my career in the end of 2013, met up with some friends and heard about NASAM, and I was introduced to Janet Yeo, the founder chairperson.
Right.
There was an opportunity for me to join NASAM.
Okay.
And I joined NASAM in April 2014.
Right. And what intrigues you to become a part of NASAM?
Well, I've never actually joined an NGO, you know, and after talking to Janet, I was actually very interested to make a change and furthermore, stroke is something that touches my heart as well because my grandmother had stroke.
I see.
Yeah, so I could relate to stroke.
I see. Right, and you, Yi Lin, how about you?
I'm actually a physiotherapist.
By profession?
By profession for the past 19 years. When I was a student in my second year, I remembered that we were given a project and I came across a short video of a stroke patient, which was the founder of NASAM, Janet Yeo.
Right.
Yeah, and I saw this part that just jumped out of the show, and she was saying that she said, I just felt like I had a life when for the first time after my stroke, I could squat down and touch the grass
and before
in my
that
garden.
She couldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that just sparked my interest in NASAM because she was speaking on behalf of NASAM and definitely inspired me more in my studying and career of physiotherapy.
Right.
So I
becoming part of NASAM, what was the reason?
Yeah. So I worked first in a hospital, university hospital, for about 7-8 years. Then I moved on to a corporate hospital, a private hospital, for a couple of years, and then I opened my own private practice. Okay. And in this whole process, we deal with many stroke patients. And along the way, one of the ex-board members of NASAM, which is Natin Sharifa, I have kept contact with her, you know, and one day she called me up and said, you know, Yi Lin, would you like to come on board? And of course I remember NASA because I remember Janet, you know. Yeah, this is the one
Janet.
that inspired. Yeah.
Right.
And I said, yes, so she arranged a meeting and that's how it started 2 years ago, wasn't it?
I see.
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah.
Right. And let's talk about stroke now. When we say stroke, the first thing that we can imagine is that people could not move, there's something wrong with their movement, mobility especially. Sometimes you can see it from their faces. But can you define what stroke means, Sylvia?
Yeah, actually stroke is a brain attack.
Okay.
You know, just like heart attack happens in the heart, stroke is a brain attack. Now, it happens when the blood supply is disrupted to a certain part of the brain.
Okay.
So as we all know, the blood actually carries the oxygen to the brain. So, and the brain consists of several parts, you know, and each part is actually responsible for a certain function of our body. So say for instance, if the stroke actually happens on the left brain, it may affect the speech, you know, or if the stroke happens in a certain part, it may affect the movement of your left arm.
I see.
You know, so stroke actually affects different people differently.
I see. And
stroke is devastating because when it happens, it doesn't just affect the patient, but it affects the whole family.
It's true. Yes.
Yeah. So, and further to that, there are two types of stroke. One is ischemic stroke caused by blood clot. And the other one is hemorrhagic stroke.
Yeah.
85% of stroke are usually the ischemic type, caused by blood clot, and the rest is actually hemorrhagic, which is usually more fatal.
Right. And what would be the cause usually of stroke?
Okay.
With the hemorrhage,
Well, hemorrhagic stroke is actually caused by the burst of a blood vessel.
Okay.
All right. So when we talk about causes, then we actually go back to the risk factors. Some of the risk factors are like high blood pressure. People with high blood pressure are 6 times more likely to get a stroke.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the statistics. And the other risk factors are like high cholesterol. People who are diabetic are more prone to stroke.
I see.
Yeah, and people with high red blood count as well as people with atrial fibrillation, which is irregular heartbeat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about stroke, how do we know that, if we ourselves are getting the stroke, or when we see a family member, whoever is having a stroke, what would be their telltales of a person having a stroke?
All right, the symptoms of stroke.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about right at the moment when the person is having a stroke, we always go by the acronym FAST.
F-A-S-T. Okay.
That's the easiest to remember.
Okay.
So F meaning facial drooping.
Right.
So the person who is having a stroke will have a lopsided face.
Okay.
All right. And A meaning arms. The arms will be weak.
Okay.
All right. So we usually get a person to test it by holding both sides of the arms.
Right.
So one side will actually be weaker and dropping.
Okay.
So for S is speech.
Okay.
Some patients will have their speech slurred.
Right.
So and T is actually time to call the ambulance or to rush to the hospital.
Okay. And when you see all these telltales, what would be the first thing that we should do?
If you're with the person, you mean?
Right.
Well, the first thing is we should ask the person to be in a very comfortable position, preferably, where if it's an issue of they're feeling fainting or what, that their legs should be elevated, and while somebody quickly goes and call the ambulance. Yeah, make sure the room is aerated.
Okay.
Not cooked up. And try to keep talking to the person. I think that's good to keep them as alert and calm.
Okay.
Because the person may be feeling a bit nervous or panicky.
Right. Yeah? Are they really conscious at that time? Because I remember when my mom had it, she was talking, even though it's a bit slurred and things like that. But after that, she says she couldn't remember anything at all.
Yeah.
But so I was wondering whether whatever we were saying to her at that moment, she understands, or was she just, in her own mind? So does it affect whenever I talk to a person who's having a stroke?
Yeah. At that point of time, I think personally that the person is with it. But you see, there's a sort of like a short space of memory, loss of during acute situation, so they may not be able to remember.
Right.
So
but at that moment, they may.
Yeah. So if we are panicky, at that point of time, it aggravates. So it's very important that we recognize the fast that Sylvia was saying, but remain calm and do the needful ASAP.
Right.
That's the most important.
In fact, when my mom had the stroke, she was the one who told us what to do. She said, took out all my golds and my earrings and things like that, make me wear something decent because, send me to the hospital. She was the one who was lying down and telling me what to do, telling the whole family actually what to do. So I was wondering, is she awake at that moment? But when she was in the hospital after a few days and we asked her, she says she couldn't remember anything. So I was wondering, was she?
It was her.
Yeah. So she was really. she was awake at that moment. It's just that she lost some of the memories.
Yes.
Right. So after that, call the ambulance, or if we can, bring the family member straight to the hospital. Right. So there's something that I read that there's the duration from the person gets a stroke until the hospital. It needs to be in that duration that they can be saved.
Within 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yes, within 4 hours.
What can we save in that 4 hours? What can we do?
Well, if the person is rushed to the hospital fast enough within the 4 hours, then the doctors may be able to reverse the situation.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's this medical procedure that they call thrombolysis, where they remove the blood clot as well.
Right.
Yeah. So.
But are there some cases where they can't remove the blood? Like my mom, they can't remove it. So it's there. So what will be the effect of, if the doctors can't remove it? Would there be a prolonged effect?
Well, that's why, as I've mentioned, different people are affected differently.
Okay.
Because the blood clot may be happening on the left side or the right side, so it depends actually.
Right.
The severity and the disability or the dependence in future.
Okay.
So everybody is affected differently.
Right.
Plus the general baseline of the health of the person. That's why all these risk factors are so important, whether it's the patient diabetes free, high cholesterol free, to what extent. Yeah, that's why risk factors are something preventive that we should start even from a young age to bring this awareness.
Right. And talking about age, I'm guessing that you do have statistics in your research about people with stroke. So what do you find? What have you found in terms of stroke, especially in Malaysia?
Okay, we have general statistics. There are actually 15 million cases of stroke in the world every year.
Right.
And in Malaysia, there are more than 50,000 cases every year.
Right.
Stroke is currently the second leading cause of death in Malaysia, even surpassing cancer. It is second to heart disease.
What?
And if you look at the more alarming rate, if you try to picture it, every 6 seconds in the world, somebody has a stroke.
Right, whether it's minor or major.
Yes, and every 2 seconds, somebody actually dies from stroke.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
sorry, the other way around.
Right.
Every 6 seconds, somebody dies.
Okay.
Every 2 seconds, somebody gets a stroke.
Right. And in Malaysia, usually the age that are prone to having stroke, do you have that kind of statistics?
No, we don't have that statistics, but we do see a lot of young people having stroke nowadays.
Right. What would be the cause usually?
It could be due to stress. Smoking is actually a risk factor. Yeah, and high alcohol intake is a risk factor.
Right. And are there cases where, there's a dear friend of mine who had a stroke at a very, very young age, but he doesn't have any
residual
problem, no risk factor. He doesn't smoke. He has a very healthy life and things like that. But suddenly he just had this fever, and he just got stroke. So what would that be? What would that fall under on the risk factor?
There's this issue whereby how about the lifestyle or the season of that lifestyle?
Okay.
Was that person under a very high stress period, plus not sleeping enough, eating very fast, all the holistic way of looking at a person.
Right. So that could be a cause as well.
That could be a contributing factor, what we call it, and of course there's this factor where that's this thing that we don't have a say in nature of a stroke happening. But if we are more and more conscientious of preventing the risk factors, the chances of that happening in the general public is very, very, very
slim.
low.
Right. So that's a very rare
freak.
So now the question would be, now you have a stroke or the family member has a stroke. It's the life after stroke usually the question. People would start thinking like myself. I was the one who took care of my mother right after she had a stroke. So I was not working for a year and a half just to take care of her because everybody else was working and having their own family. So to me, as I was very, very young, I was only about 18, 19 at that time. So it's something that very new to me. And my mom, it's like 4, 5 sizes bigger than I am. So I was like really worried on how to take care of her. So I thought of, this thing wasn't, I was not given the awareness about this in any time when I was in school or things like that. So it was really something that is very foreign to me. So, so for a first timer like myself, what would you say that I should do as a caretaker? What would be my first thing to do before I bring back my mother to the house?
I think for me, from the point of view as a medical professional, implementing the biopsychosocial model, the first thing that I would definitely encourage a carer to do is listen.
Right.
Listen to the person, listen to the medical professionals that are explaining to you things that are relevant to your mother, taking
right.
care of your mother, but then at the same time listen to your mother in what she's receiving, her feedback in what she's receiving,
right,
to be able to understand how to empower her to take ownership of her own recovery.
Okay, so that should be the first thing.
Yes, that would be the first for me.
Right, okay, we have to go for a short break, and when we come back we'll talk more on this right here on Hello Malaysia, so stay tuned. Right, welcome back to Hello Malaysia with me, Sue, Sylvia and Yi Lin, and we're talking about stroke. And before we went for a break, we were talking about what stroke is, and we were also talking about what should be the first thing that we do if we discover that someone is having a stroke. And now we are discussing on what should we do when we are bringing a stroke patient back, or the stroke patient themselves. What should they do now they are back at home? So you were saying that the first thing is listen to the person, listen to the doctor and their needs and things like that. So the second thing, what should we do? Maybe Sylvia, you can say something about that.
Maybe I can tell you a bit of what NASAM does.
Okay.
Okay. So in NASAM, we believe that early rehab actually reduces long-term dependency.
Okay.
Okay. So the sooner a person or stroke patient starts rehab, the better.
Right.
Okay. Again, subject to the severity of their stroke.
Okay.
So in NASAM, when the stroke patients come the first time to see us, we will do an assessment of what the disability is about, and we will actually then provide counseling to the stroke patients as well as the caretaker.
Right.
All right. So because we have to understand, when a person goes through stroke, they actually go through a lot of emotions, emotional changes.
Right.
You know, they go through denial.
Right.
They go through anger. It's like, why me? You know, why me? We always think, why me? Because why not the other person?
Right.
You know? So then they go through frustration because they can't actually do the things they used to do.
Right.
They can't even probably lift a cup. You know. And finally, a lot of stroke patients actually slip into a depression. So in NASAM, we feel that emotional therapy is very important. We will try to help the stroke patient get over these negative emotions, so that then they become more fit to actually begin their rehab.
Right.
You know, we motivate them.
Right.
So a bit more about that NASAM. We do physiotherapy, speech therapy. Occupational therapy will be like teaching them how to button a shirt, how to tie a shoelace. You know, it's like relearning certain life skills.
Right.
And then apart from emotional therapy and counseling, we also have community activities.
Right.
I
So
think
they
that
can
is the
be
heartbeat.
part of the community.
Yeah, that is
again.
the heartbeat of NASAM. That's the uniqueness of NASAM.
Right.
Because we do have group therapy, where we will actually place stroke patients into levels which are similar to them. Like, so they mix with people who are similar to them, you know. So when they come to NASAM every day for 2 hours, they actually exercise together, they do yoga together, and they do, even we bring them out to have teh tarik, you know, to practice ordering their drinks and so on. So that becomes a community. They have bonding, and they encourage each other. They become family.
Right.
So you see after a while that the stroke patients become happier.
Yes.
And that is a very good sign in their road to recovery.
I see.
Yeah.
Right, but that I agree. You know, when we sent my mom to a physiotherapist's place, so she was happy when she started doing her therapy and things like that. But the thing is, when we brought her home, I think it was about a month, 2 months that she was at home. She doesn't even want to try and lift her own legs. You know, she has a stroke. It's on her left side. She couldn't move on her left side. So even when we asked her to do, just try and move, she says she can't move. She might fall. She might break something and things like. So there's nothing that we, as a family member, could say to her that she could believe. But once we sent her to the physiotherapist, whatever the physiotherapist said, which what we are saying as well, or we said, she said, okay, I can do it, now she can do it. So at home, before we sent this person to the physiotherapy, what should we do? What should we try and, you know, besides listening to her, but at the same time, we need to, you know, put some encouragement into her and get her up and about again. So what should we do in terms of, you know, making sure that she doesn't fall into depression and things like that?
Yeah. So other than what Sylvia has said,
Right.
I think the empowerment needs to also be given and focused onto the carer, and that's one of the things we are working at as well in NASAM, to work with the family. And today's dynamic, and maybe when you were 18, the dynamic of the families have also changed.
Right.
You know, for example, today many families have maids.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And so when a person before the stroke was depending on a maid to do certain things, after the stroke, the person doesn't want to still be doing some things when before the stroke that was the scenario.
Right.
There's this what we call the biopsychosocial model, you know.
Okay.
So however, there will be certain things that they used to do themselves, but it may look so small and simple. And that's where we want the patient to take the ownership and give the empowerment, the guidance to the carer on where do you draw the line.
Okay.
Bearing in mind that before the stroke, this was the life. After the stroke, there may need to be some changes,
Okay.
but the issue is you can't just change everything
Right.
overnight. You have to give it bit by bit. And one good way, and I think that would be a way of moving forward also in stroke rehab, would be a lot of the times the patient comes with the maid and then they just leave the person there for the stroke rehab.
Right.
But now I think it would be good for actually the carers that have been appointed for the patient will actually do the certain things that the therapist would be doing, because
Okay.
that's where the confidence builds.
Okay.
You know, so the therapist may draw or, you know, may withdraw a little bit so that at a certain timing the carer
Right.
can actually be doing more.
Okay.
But whether you like it or not, when we are dealing with a patient, we're not just dealing with the brain recovery. There's a mind component to that patient. So, for example, if I'm a third party, I'm a medical professional, even if the patient doesn't think she can do it, she will still try it because it's a third party
Yes.
requesting it.
Yes.
So that's that component
Right.
to remember. Yeah.
Right.
And we just do the best. And when the patient doesn't want to do it, sometimes it's just this other factor, you know, of
Right.
the upbringing, the way the dynamics of the family is, and who they're taking instructions from, you know. Like one very simple example, I had a stroke patient. Before his stroke, he was like a GM, you know, and he would be instructing people, and overnight, everything is being instructed to him, including the nurse, the doctor,
So
the
he couldn't
wife.
take it.
And so yeah, he just went into, instead of a depression, into an aggressive
Rage.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So when I did therapy with him, I finally listened to some extent, and I said to the wife, now this is how I'm going to do my therapy for the first 6 weeks. It
Okay.
will be very gentle, very mild.
Right.
But everything I do, I will ask his permission.
Okay.
So it is not
Is
like
it okay
I'm
for me to do
instructing.
this?
So I
Right.
would tell a story a little
Right.
bit and say, and so this is how Mr. So and so did it. Would you like me to try it for you?
Right.
So,
he
you see,
could
that's that
take it.
biopsychosocial approach where you're not talking about the brain recovery, but a mind component.
I see.
And it's so much easier when they come to a place like NASAM, because they can see that the others are also doing it.
Right.
You know?
But it's true, like I said, my mom, when she went for her physiotherapy, it was good for her because she can see people who, just like her, you know, recovering from stroke. And she has that strength to do it. But for the first month or so, when I was, you know, taking care of her, it was a mental breakdown for both of us. You know, I was frustrated, she was frustrated. We couldn't just see eye to eye with each other. But at the same time, you know, I have to take care of her, so it was really, really hard. But even that, to bring her, to suggest to her to go for a physiotherapy was harder. Because she said, there's nothing you guys can do because I can't move anymore. But, you know, lo and behold, when she went there even on the first day, we had to carry her. You know, she's like 3-4 sizes bigger than I am. So we have to put inside the car, drag her, you know, carry her inside the car. But when we came back from the physiotherapy, she was standing.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, I told you can do this. You didn't listen to me. So now, besides, you know, telling the caretaker, what can you tell the patient about themselves, Sylvia?
Well, actually, my personal experience is just be patient.
Okay.
But just be patient, because we have to understand what the person is going through. You know, we have to slowly encourage them to regain their confidence, because by not being able to do simple tasks, not to forget that they have lost their dignity somewhat.
Okay.
So we cannot rush them. We have to be patient, you know, and try to encourage and motivate them. That's
Right.
the key, actually.
Right.
So, like I was mentioning, when stroke strikes, then it affects the whole family.
It does.
You know, so I think the difference between a person who recovers very well actually
Right.
lies in the fact of the family support.
Right.
You know, so in the case of Janet Yeo, our founder chairperson, I think that was a main key factor that allowed her to recover
Right.
and actually still live a wholesome life.
Right.
You know,
and
she
talking about
managed it.
Janet, because she is the founder of NASAM. Maybe you can, you know, tell us a history of NASAM a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah, so Janet had stroke when she was 44.
Okay.
She was at the peak of her career, actually.
Wow.
She was in the advertising industry. And when stroke happened, I think she was waiting for a meeting, you know, and what she told us was she found that she couldn't grasp a cup or something.
Right.
You know, and she thought it was because she was
Tired,
tired or something.
yes.
She was stressed, you know, but actually stroke was happening at that time.
Okay.
So she always also tell us that, you know, if only she had known about fast,
Right.
you know, so then she would have recognized that and, you know, rushed to the hospital immediately.
Right.
So
So you can do fast on your own,
Yes.
on your self-diagnose.
no, well, some people are able to recognize it.
Okay,
you know?
right. So you were
but
saying?
it's the people around them.
Right.
So as she recovered, she actually found that there was very little information and
Yes.
support group for stroke. That was in the late 80s, you know. So she decided to start NASAM, and initially they started actually at the backyard of her house.
Okay.
You know, meeting once a month, then once a week, and so on.
Where did she get the other members to be with her support group?
From friends, you know, business associates, generous donors, and volunteers. So after about a year of doing all these support group meetings, she registered NASAM with the Registrar of Societies. And that was in late 1996.
Okay.
So 19 years ago, actually.
Right. And so far, what kind of services can we get from NASAM?
Yeah, as I've mentioned earlier, it is physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, as well as the recreational therapy.
I see. Right. So, anybody with stroke can go to NASAM and get some help?
Yes.
Right. So when let's say a stroke patient wants to go to NASAM, what will be the first thing that you need? Medical report and things like that.
Yes, that's right. So
Right.
they will come with a carer. Our physiotherapists will actually talk to them and
Okay.
assess their disability.
Right. And this open 5 days a week or 7 days a week, every day.
Yeah, 5 days a week.
5
Yeah.
days a week. Okay, that's good. The other thing is, okay, now we talk about you know, having them rehab in, at, for example, NASAM. So what else can we do at home, continuing whatever has been taught at NASAM?
I think the platform for an answer like this is, it is not like as though we give you a recipe and instruction and
Right.
then you can go back and just do it. The issue is, in a rehab, right, there must be very clear goals set. And the problem is sometimes we put the patient in a box, that how the person should be and what the person should be able to achieve. There are more and more new approaches in physiotherapy whereby we really want the patient to take ownership of that movement that they're wanting to learn or that particular thing.
Right.
The issue is when the patient is not able to reach a cup, they just say, I want to go back and pick up a cup to drink.
Yes.
Now, in order to go back and pick up a cup to drink, there is this, there's dots to
Right.
join it to finally reach to the cup.
Right.
And the therapist will then go through with the carer. They can't pick up the cup to reach in 1 week. It may take 6 months. So let's break it down into smaller things. And these smaller things, it must be very clearly stated and patiently repeated every day. And it's like a pact you make with the therapist, you know. with the
Ask-
maid,
ask-
right? Yeah,
alright.
or the child will say, I'm going to check with your daughter, you know, next week whether did you do the same and
Right,
how
right.
many times did you do. So
Right.
that's that ownership, and that's that dynamics of not just instruction, go back do, instruction, go back do.
Right.
Yeah, so when there's a life that we are allowing the person to be out of the box, why do I have to pick it up this way? Why can't I pick it up another way since I have some limitation?
I see.
That's what we mean, you see. Let the
Right.
person decide
how she
how
or
she
he-
wants to do
right.
it. Yeah. And for some cases, especially those who have not heard about a stroke rehab and came in later, like they've had the stroke for 1 year, 2 years,
Yes.
they listen to a show like this and they
Right,
come.
right.
It doesn't mean that they still cannot pick up a cup. So now we're going to think about another aspect. Now, how do you still have a life of what you actually wanted instead of just being at home,
Right.
visiting, by using your other side and helping this to, you know, that means,
Recover.
yeah,
Right.
while you're doing it with the other hand or
I
the other leg.
see.
It's not that we just have to focus on the part that's weak. The issue is we want them to believe that they have a life after stroke.
Right.
It's not about recovery.
Right.
It's about a life.
Okay,
You know?
okay, we have to go for
Yeah.
a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk the life after stroke right here on Hello Malaysia. Stay tuned. Right, welcome back to Hello Malaysia with me, Sue, Sylvia and Yi Lin from NASAM, and we're talking about stroke. And before we went for a break, we were talking about, you know, things, there's life after stroke and things that NASAM could do to help on the rehabilitation. Now, we talked about NASAM a little bit, you know, about the founder whom she herself had stroke, and you know, she had the idea to build NASAM and, you know, helping other people out as well. But what will be the mission and vision of NASAM?
So actually, the mission of NASAM is to tell people that there is life after stroke.
Okay.
And our vision is actually to set up a center, a NASAM center in every state of the country.
Okay.
So after 19 years, we currently have 8 centers.
Wow.
We have one in Penang, one in Ipoh, in Kuantan, Ampang, PJ, Malacca, Johor Bahru, and KK, Kota
Right.
Kinabalu. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And who
And
do you cater to? Do you cater to only, let's say, you know, some underprivileged people who like to seek help from NASAM? Do you support this kind of people as well at NASAM?
okay, we do not discriminate. We actually, I mean, the 2 objectives of NASAM is actually to provide rehab therapy for stroke patients, and the second one is to raise awareness in stroke and its prevention. So we accept all stroke patients, you know, but I think our main focus is actually to try and reach out to people who need our help.
Right.
You know, people who cannot even afford to come
Yes.
to NASAM because they can't afford the transportation and so on.
Yes.
So, and because NASAM is an NGO, we are not profit making. You know, we rely heavily on the donations of the public and the goodwill of volunteers and so on.
Okay.
So, and even the contribution that is paid by the stroke patient is actually heavily subsidized, you know, as compared to the hospitals,
Right.
for instance.
Okay.
So by having a structure like that, we actually try to cater to people who cannot afford private healthcare.
Right. And in terms of people with strokes coming into your organization, how about patient who has been, like she mentioned, you know, 1, 2 years, even 3 years, you know, and he has been laying down on the bed for 3, 4 years. Do you accept that kind of patient as well, or do you need them to, you know, go to the doctor and get themselves recovered a little bit? Then you can accept them in terms of rehabilitation.
No, we don't discriminate. We will
Okay.
accept stroke patients, you know,
Right.
whether they had a stroke recently or some time back.
Right. And I'm guessing that, you know, your physiotherapist would be certified and very professional with these people.
Yes, they are all qualified physiotherapists. We have 23 physios and 15 admin staff. So we have close to about 40 staff in
Right.
the whole of NASAM.
Okay.
So apart from the 8 centers, we also have a head office, which consists of admin staffs.
Right. And what kind of facilities do you have over at NASAM?
Facilities, we actually are more focused in therapy, as
Okay.
in, I think Yi Lin will be able to explain
Right.
it better, rather than on facilities or equipment.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yi Lin.
Just to retract a little bit.
Okay.
So, to us, the issue is you have to be diagnosed that you have had a stroke.
Okay.
So even if it was 2-3 years ago, somebody in the medical professional deemed accountable
person.
will be able to say that yes, the doctor told me I had a stroke.
I see.
So yeah, so that first layer is confirmed that they had a stroke. Yeah, then the therapist will then do further movement assessments to
Right.
determine what level of rehab should you start with.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what NASAM offers basically is first a walkthrough with talking through and walk through with the family and the patient on which level are they at, you know.
Right. So you have
in a
levels.
basic
Okay.
levels.
What would
of,
be the very minimum level of a stroke patient?
where most likely they can't use their hand at all.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's totally limp and they're on a wheelchair, but they can be willing to come. They can come. They are in a wheelchair.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from there, there is a little bit of customization on if it's a hand activity for that day. Now the therapist is going to go around. It's in a group, right? So that everybody is being, you know, it's like you have a competitor
Right.
or someone to inspire to do something.
Okay.
And then the therapist will have a rough gauge on what cues they need to give for a certain person,
Okay.
or, you know, just to get the energy going.
Right.
Yeah? And they do have some one-on-one therapies whereby when it is just too difficult, the dot to cross to the next is just too difficult, they may
Right.
give like a booster whereby there's a one-on-one therapy
Right.
with the therapist that will help them and the carer to work through something that they'll be given to do at home.
Okay.
And the good thing about NASAM is the group therapy is every day. So even if they're not doing it at home, if they're coming every day,
Right.
they're doing something, and that gets the brain
Working.
to activate. Yeah, and that's
Right.
what we want in a
Okay.
recovery
Right.
plus a life, you know, following
Right.
that.
And I saw, because you know, sometimes I send my mother to the physiotherapy, and I see some like a wheel. You know, she has to hold on to the wheel and start wheeling with her hands. You know, and then she has to climb 3 stairs and things like that. So what would that benefit her? What would that create for her?
Yeah. So in order to be able to achieve a movement, there's so many things that's happening in
the
the
brain.
body.
Okay.
It starts with the brain, and actually it starts with the mind. Do I want to do it?
I see.
So, you know, physiotherapy 20 years ago was just
On the physical part.
yeah,
Right.
you know, on the brain and the body, the muscle and the bone. But today, physiotherapy has developed with research and etc. etc. And so we see ourselves as movement specialists.
Okay.
And in order to do a movement, there's a mind involvement. You know?
Right.
I want to do this now. The next thing is, how do I tell my brain to tell my body to do
move,
it?
yes.
And so you have all these equipments.
Right.
For some men, they don't like equipments that make them look childish because there's a mind
Yes.
component.
Okay.
So then we have to think of, you know, for
No,
example,
other ways to
another
do
way.
it.
Yeah, like one of the activities we used to have in group therapy is sweeping the floor.
Okay.
Who can sweep the fastest? Those things that we put to the other end.
Right.
But then we realize some men don't like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So then we
Demeaning.
would, yeah.
Okay.
to some, not to all.
Right.
To some. Yeah.
Right.
So then we would think of another activity, but you see, we want them to engage in wanting to do it in the
Activity.
first place.
Right.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
that's the idea.
So that's what I think thinking out of the box is now, and moving forward with physiotherapy, rehabilitation, occupational therapy.
Right.
It's not just, okay, the brain needs to recover, you need to do this. No.
Right.
We look at the person's life. Oh, is the person having a role of a breadwinner? Oh, if he's a breadwinner,
Yeah.
now we're going to think of different things that's much
he
more
can do.
relevant. Yeah,
Right.
so that he can continue supporting the family.
Right.
But if he's a retiree or she's a retiree, there's no rush. She has been having quite a happy, easygoing life.
Right.
We're also not going to come in to say,
And rush
suddenly
her.
you have to do all this when she
Right.
can't apply it at home.
Okay.
So that's the biopsychosocial approach NASAM has.
Okay, that's
One-on-one and with a group.
Right.
Yeah.
And talking about rehabilitation, as a stroke patient, let's say she recovered some movements and things like that. should she go and continue the rehabilitation once, let's say she has the movement again, you know, she's okay, even though it's not as strong as before, but she has the movement. Should she continue going for physiotherapy?
Okay, so I'll speak like how I know Janet.
Okay.
So when I first knew Janet, that was her earlier time of her stroke. Now it's been years.
Okay.
And I've sort of lost touch with NASAM. And then recently, she wanted to improve something. So of course, what we say is there's a quantity and there's a quality. And if you want to improve quality, it never stops.
Okay.
Yeah, you just keep going to what's the next level you want. I will empower it.
Okay.
Yeah,
right. But do you know, by looking at patient, the limitation one can do? You know, I think you can only do up to this. Do you have that? Can you see that kind of limitation towards a patient?
Personally, I choose not to, because then that becomes a limitation.
I see.
So what I would say is, this is the typical standard, but give me a bonus, surprise me. If you are willing to go that extra mile, so am I.
Right.
And then we work towards that, you know.
I see. All right. Okay, we'll go for another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk more on stroke right here on Hello Malaysia. Stay tuned. Right, and welcome back to Hello Malaysia with me, Sue, Sylvia and Yi Lin, and we're talking about stroke. And now we want to talk about, you know, the World Stroke Day. What does that mean, Sylvia, World Stroke Day?
Okay, World Stroke Day is on 29 October every year. So as for NASAM, we usually actually do a walkathon in the month of October in conjunction with World Stroke Day. Okay. So for instance, on the 25th October, we have our NASAM Color Walk. And in the past years, we have actually been doing a walkathon for 3 to 5 km in Taman Tasik Titiwangsa.
I see. Yeah. Right.
So
the family members and the patient will join us together.
Yes. And the public as well. We invite the public to walk with the stroke patients so that they can then understand and be aware of what stroke is. And how to prevent stroke. Right. So that is something that NASAM is very passionate about. I think what we hope for is for the day to come when everyone knows what stroke is and how to recognize the symptoms, as well as how to prevent stroke. Act fast.
Okay, right. And moving forward, you know, what would you like to see? You know, we'll start with you. What would you like to see, you know, in the future with regards to stroke?
I think I've put it into 3 points or 3 aspirations to transform the healthcare system and the belief of a stroke patient. Number 1, believe that you can be out of the box. You can say this is the life you want. Once you say and believe that, step 1, be responsible. You as a patient, be responsible. Take ownership of your rehab. The doctor, take ownership of the rehab. Number 2, be courageous. It's a challenging journey. Don't give up. Be courageous. Keep taking a step at a time. And finally is think out of the, when you have to think out of the box, you have to be matured. There will be situations where you will just have to let it go and move on, move forward. It could be in a way of thinking of how you're going to live your life, but don't let the recovery level limit what you think life should be.
I see. Right.
You know? And that is really, it's a new way of thinking even for the medical professionals. We are so used to just saying recover is this. But it is not so. You know?
You can go beyond.
Yes, you can go beyond and still have a life with different ways of doing things. Just remember, you want that life.
It has to start with yourself.
Yes.
And what's in store in the future, especially for NASAM, Sylvia?
Yes. So as an NGO, we rely heavily on the public support. So we also look forward to more public support, so that we can actually set up more centers across the country and to help and reach out to more people. You know. And one of the other events that we usually do every year is the Food and Fun Fair. That is actually a fundraising event. We have it every year during the middle of the year in Taman Jaya usually. So that is also a celebration where we invite the public to come and actually buy stuff from the stores, and that in turn helps NASAM.
Contributes.
Towards NASAM. Yes, and we also hope more corporations, big companies could actually adopt NASAM as part of their CSR program. You know, So that will actually go a long way to help NASAM, to help more people.
I see,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And as the last word, what can you say? We'll start with Sylvia. What would you like to say to the public about
Yeah.
NASAM or stroke?
Actually, I have something to share with everyone about TIA.
Okay, what's that?
Which is transient ischemic attack.
Oh.
So it is actually also known as mini stroke.
Okay.
You know, a lot of our patients come to us and they say, oh, they had that. So what happens is it is all the symptoms similar to stroke.
Okay.
But the symptoms actually go away after a few hours or within
Okay.
24 hours.
Okay.
So a lot of patients think they're all right, you know, after resting, it is just stress, maybe I'm tired,
I
and
see.
they just do not take any further action.
Okay.
Now that could be a warning sign of a full stroke coming later.
Wow. Okay.
So I
That-
always like to actually highlight to people
Right.
that is actually a very important factor to know. Yeah.
Right. So the telltales will be similar to stroke.
Fast, similar to fast, facial drooping, speech slurring, you know, arm weakness, and is actually an emergency situation.
Right. So you
Yeah.
rush yourself. So do you want to give that kind of awareness to people out there?
Yes, that's
right.
right.
And from you, Yi Lin, what would you like to say?
I think the final word would be, as a community, all of us, you know, yes, NASAM is representing the stroke, but every one of us can actually, if you have seen this show, talk to somebody to say that there is life after stroke. That's the real final word we want to say. Don't limit yourself, don't limit people. Remember, you can take that first step, take that ownership, and there'll be people to empower you to that
Right.
life you want.
Okay, so if they need more information, I have a lot of booklets here given by, produced by NASAM especially. So we have this book on understanding stroke. We have this book on there's life after stroke. So if they need more information, where could they go to, Sylvia?
They can actually visit the NASAM centers, you know, or for people in the audience who is interested to know
Right.
more about NASAM,
If you
visit
can
our
see,
website.
there's a lot of branches here. Yeah.
That's right.
Right. Do you have any Facebook that they can go to?
Yes, we have a Facebook page,
Right. It's
Yeah.
called
National Stroke Association NASAM.
All right. So or they can go to the website at www.nasam.org. Right. Thank you so much, Sylvia and Yi Lin,
Thank you.
for
Okay, thank
telling
you.
us about stroke. And thank you so much for tuning in to Hello Malaysia. Until we meet again real soon, I'm Surati Sanusi. Goodbye.
Okay.